I couldn't, the words which I saw on my paper, right, on the book just didn't come out the right way sometimes. So it made me question why I couldn't do certain things like everyone else could, right? It made me question if I was defective. It made me question if I was going to in the future be able to like do things. And so I think there was a lot that comes from not knowing what you were dealing with and just having your imagination take you to wild places, right? Like I kind of wish I was diagnosed and okay, this is what you have, dyslexia. You sometimes might confuse your six and your nines. You sometimes like confuse left and right. All these different things. I think for me, I just had to learn how to cope in many ways, right? But it was still tough. And I think I would get terrified to read out loud even in high school.
Welcome back to the Black and Raww Podcast. I'm your host, Tino. Here's a podcast that's playing the dialogue and the space for Black men to be their most authentic selves. My guest today, guys, is someone who I think you're going to really find very remarkable. Chi came from Nigeria and settled into the US at a very young age, and you hear about how he found settling in the US and what helped him adjust to this new culture and this new environment. And you're going to be able to hear Chi's story of how he went from a migrant that just came to the country to someone that ended up working for one of the biggest banks in the world. You know, have you heard of JP Morgan? Just that small bank. So Chi comes onto the podcast to talk about his journey, to talk about how he was able to work for JP Morgan. But that's not where Chi's story stops. Chi has been able to go into analytical sports and has been able to develop his own company. And I think you guys are going to really find this interesting. And I think you're really going to enjoy what Chi has to say. And I think you're going to really find his story inspirational. Oh, and before we get to the episode, I just wanted to share with you that I have a talk next Tuesday on the 10th of October, and I'm going to just put a little thing for you here. So for any men that want to come along, I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. It's something which I think is going to be quite an interesting conversation and discussion too. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the episode. Let me know what you thought about it in the comment section. So here is my conversation with Chi. Hi, Chi. Welcome to the Black and Raww Podcast. It's really good to have you on.
Thank you, Tino. I appreciate it. Looking forward to our conversation.
No, bless. So when we had a little chat before this, you'd mentioned that you moved from Nigeria to the US when you were quite a young age. Do you remember that move? Like, do you remember sort of adapting to the US and everything?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I do. I was 5 years old when I moved, so I was pretty young. But for me, I do recall, like, for one, we moved on Christmas Eve.
Wow.
So my first time having to wear a winter jacket and seeing snow, right? That was a whole experience. Like, what is this white stuff on the ground? My first time having cafeteria food at school, having like the little circle pizza, not liking pizza, which is tastes nasty. I mean, I remember lots of different things. But I remember also just feeling confused and uncomfortable. I think going to New York City is a lot as a young child, and so I think there was that. There's also just being a kid too. Kids are bullies at that age, right?
Yeah, kids are mean, man.
6, 7, 8, man. They will find anything to pick on you for. I think I had to learn quickly just to, one, have tough skin, and then two, I think just find my lane in different places and not get too worked up about trying to please everybody and be everyone's friend. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, kids can be so mean when you're younger. Even like I've had a kid just outright call me fat. And it's not like he's wrong, but it's like, dude, you don't need to just say that to me outright from nowhere, man. Okay. I get you.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it is. So for me, I mean, I think I have 4 nephews and 4 nieces now. And so for me, I try a lot to let them know that you can speak your opinion, but to speak kind to people, right? So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And so for you, like, was there anything that helped you sort of adapt to the US? Like, was anything that helped you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was always a big sports fan. I mean, I grew up watching the World Cup with my dad and recording the World Cups on VHS and trying to write down who's playing who. And so for me, coming to the States, football wasn't played much, right? Soccer wasn't played much. And so I had to kind of adapt to the sports which were more popular in New York. And at that time, it was baseball was a very popular sport. I mean, the New York Yankees played in the Bronx where I'm from. And so um, when I was 8, I asked my mom and dad to join like the I guess the kids league, right? The little league of baseball in my neighborhood. And I think my mom and dad knew that I was struggling to make friends and in many ways having issues in terms of getting in fights at school. And so I said, you know what? Let's have him play this random sport we don't know about. My dad had no idea what baseball was. My mom had no idea, but they kind of like had my back, rather. My dad would go out there with me on the field and try to teach me how to play, but he was confused. And they eventually got one of our neighbors who was a coach to kind of take me under his wing. And so I had to learn from scratch, right? And it was tough to be bad initially at baseball. I mean, I was really, really bad. And so I would go out there and try out for teams and get cut. I would just, but still, I'll go back and practice, man, and really push at it. Which I think is just a life lesson right there, right? You might not be good at something initially, but if you keep on trying it, eventually you'll get better, right? And then you'll get better and better. And so for me, that was a lesson. And then 2, I think I had to find ways to still be a good teammate, even though I was bad at baseball. You know what I mean? Like, and so for me, it's knowing how to be vocal and support my teammates and cheer them on, right? And try to think about ways to still support the team, even though I wasn't very good. That just helped me even more as a human being. Having 6 siblings, I have 5 sisters and 2. Yep, 5. Yep, five sisters, man. I have 5.
Oh, so you're the only boy as well?
No, so I have a younger brother, so there's 7 of us. 5 girls, 2 boys. So there's 4 girls initially. Then I came, and then my younger brother, and then my baby sister. And I always tell folks I have like essentially 5 moms. My mom and then my 4 big sisters. So, but yeah, I mean, I think sports helped me to understand how best to be a part of that team at home, right? And that always be about, I'm annoyed that I get this more portion of food. Maybe it's just thinking about, okay, how do I go out there and make money for my family to have my family have more, right? And so I became way more, I think I became way more empathetic because of sports in my journey through having to adapt as a young child to being new in sports. And then I played basketball, played football. And I think I just found that that's a place where I felt safe and comfortable. And I think my career has really, in many ways, shadowed that ways in which I see sports helping people adapt and learn skills.
Yeah, sports is something which, like, I've always sort of been a part of throughout my life. Like, I played rugby in school. I think I was about to say I think I played football, but I think I went for like a trial or maybe went for a few training sessions. But football was never my jam when I was younger. But you know, like you would always just like if you got a ball somewhere and you got some mates, you would always just be playing football outside, wouldn't you? Like get some hoodies or something, make a little goal post. But sports is always sort of a big part of my life. Now I play basketball, and at uni I played lacrosse.
Nice.
So I always loved just the camaraderie of a sports team. Like it's sort of just like it's your boys or like it's your girls. Like it's a very sort of good niche community. And it does teach you a lot. Like it does teach you a lot of life lessons, even just sort of like making sure you're on time for training. Like you got your time management skills. You've got, as you're saying, your communication and how can you be a leader even when you're not like performing well, you know, you don't have to sort of be the best person at something to help your team. And that can sort of just go to any stages of life, isn't it, really, in terms of how you interact in business or your friendships or your families and stuff like that. So, yeah, I've always loved sports. Like when I have kids one day, like they will play a sport. Like it doesn't matter what sport, but they'll play a sport.
No, for sure, man. And I think I think we've mentioned mostly team sports, but even individual sports. My wife ran track and field and also ran cross country. And the level of, I think, mental fortitude it takes to do an individual sport like track and field or playing tennis, right? Like, it's just you and your opponent. Your opponent is very much, it takes a lot of self-will. I think I respect people who can do that. I'm more a team sport player. Yeah, I'm like you. I think there's really a lesson which can come from just trying to understand that the whole is stronger than the individual parts, right? And that we can kind of do a whole lot more together than we can do individually. So, yeah, I love team sports, man. I think I will always see, like you said, have that be part of my life. If my kids don't want to play team sport, that's cool. They can do a team activity, like being in a band, right? Or being, I don't know, in a dance troupe.
Yeah,
the point is that I think something involving having to kind of understand that you can play a role in the bigger collective, right? And we are all connected. And this thing called life, or what we're doing, I think that's a lesson which everyone needs to at some point realize and have really part of their psyche that it's about the whole, the collective.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. Sports just sort of does many things for you, which I absolutely love, and some of the stuff you're saying as well. That it's about the whole rather than the individual. I think we live in quite an individualistic society right now. So I think those lessons can always be sort of hammered in, which I think is really good. When we talked earlier, you said that you were bullied in school and stuff like that, and you mentioned that you had dyslexia. So I wanted to know, how did that sort of impact your self-image, or sort of just how your self-image, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something where, so I'll tell a story of how dyslexia would impact me as a young person. Oftentimes in classrooms, in class, they would have people read out loud, right? Okay, it'll be Johnny's time to read out loud. Then it's going to be Amy's turn, right? And then when it came time to go to me, right, I couldn't, the words which I saw on my paper, right, on the book, just didn't come out the right way sometimes. So it made me question why I couldn't do certain things like everyone else could, right? It made me question if I was defective. It made me question if I was going to in the future be able to like do things. And so I think there was a lot that comes from not knowing what you were dealing with and just having your imagination take you to wild places, right? Like I kind of wish I was diagnosed and okay, this is what you have, dyslexia. You sometimes like confuse your six and your nines. You sometimes like confuse left and right. All these different things. I think for me, I just had to learn how to cope in many ways, right? But it was still tough. And I think I would get terrified to read out loud, even in high school, right? I mean, I'm here 16 years old, and me, I'm sweating, like profusely sweating in class when it comes time to just read and have people discuss and have dialogue and read out loud. So I think I've learned to be okay with knowing that everyone has something which they're dealing with, right? And I think that's just something which I always kind of come back to, that no one is perfect. And if I try to hide my imperfections, I am only doing myself a disservice, right? If I choose to not use my voice and speak out because I'm scared that I might be looked at funny for having a lisp or having a stutter, right? That's not going to help me out because, yeah, I mean, people can judge me for how I talk or how I read, but they can't judge my character. They don't know my heart. They don't know my thoughts. So I have to let those things be known. I have to be kind to people. I have to speak kindness. I have to just be who I want to be and not worry about what I'm not. right? So I think that was my biggest lesson. Knowing that each day I might sometimes stutter. That's fine. Like don't let that affect me and how I feel about my day, right? If in this conversation I pause for a while to collect my thoughts, right? This is me trying to practice things which over time I put in place to help me deal with dyslexia. I think that's something which is part of my story, good or bad, right? This is part of my story.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that in terms of how you're saying, there was times where you were literally sweating before a talk or something where you had to talk in front of people. And I think just sort of how you shaped your perspective and thinking about it, like it's like, okay, I might have this thing, but it's not going to stop me from saying what I want, being who I want to be. And at the end of the day, if people do judge you, so what? They don't even know you. Like they don't, as you're saying, they don't know your character. They don't know your kindness, and they don't know what you do behind the scenes. So I think, yeah, for anybody that sort of has dyslexia or has a stutter or anything, like definitely hear the words that she is saying, because I think that's the way you sort of deal with something like that. You know what I mean? Because we all have, no one's perfect. We all have our things about us. There was even that film, The King's Speech, where the dude has a stutter and he has to, do a king's speech, and he sort of overcomes it, and you see how he done that. And that's on a grand scale, but like there's people that are just sort of everyday people struggling with something and they have to overcome it. So I like how you've overcame that and how you've sort of changed your perspective on it.
Yeah. I think, I always say life is all about how you react to being punched or being hit, right? I think we can choose to stay down and be, oh my God, I have this illness, I have this ailment, I have this thing that's wrong with me. We can say, okay, I'm going to get up and figure out how to adapt, right? And I often tell people about, once again, I mentioned for me, left and right is very tough for me. And so one thing which I always do, and I still do today, is if I think about left, I make an L with my left hand. Because if I use my right hand, it's now an L. So if I can make an L with my hand, then it's left. And for me, I still do that. If I'm driving, right, and I need to go someplace, okay, just quickly L, right? If I'm doing the cha-cha slide, right, okay, right, left foot 2 times, right, okay, left. So it's just, I mean, it is what it is, right? And for me, I just have to understand that it's something which I just need to do to help just keep myself oriented, right? And so if you have to meditate each morning just to get your mind to be at ease, right? To kind of go through your day to help you deal with ADHD or who knows what, then do that, right? My wife has ADHD and she meditates probably 3 times a day just to help herself regulate. And I think that's something which, like all things, right? We have what we have, but how do we adapt? How do we make sure we can kind of still go about our day and feel safe and comfortable, right? And not let what we have keep us from being who we are.
Yeah, definitely. So we've mentioned sort of about your upbringing and about sort of your experiences in school and stuff. And we just talked about sort of dyslexia and your stutter. But for someone that was being bullied in school and struggled to have friends and that had dyslexia and had a stutter, you still ended up going to work for one of the biggest banks in the world. So how did you even get into JP Morgan? What was that process like? Because I've never talked to someone that's worked for JP Morgan, so I'm always interested to find this out.
Yeah, it's I mean, for me, I think I mentioned how sports helped me realize that I had to go out there and help support my family, right? To kind of make the pie bigger, to have us have more food and more money to kind of spend and do stuff. So for me, when I was like 15, 16, I looked at this book which had like every occupation you can do, right? It was like a trade book for my sister who was at that point in college. I looked through the book and I was like, what's the highest paying job I can get without having without having like a master's or a PhD degree, right?
Yeah.
this undergrad degree. And I looked and bam, there was investment banking, right? I'm like, what's this? Investment banking. And so for me, I think my initial motivation was let me like make the most money possible to support my family. So I was like, at that point, 16. So 16, I took an internship that summer at this essentially it's an insurance company called AIG, American Insurance Group. And I took an internship through this program I was in, and essentially I was going to work in this department, and my strict job was to take physical files and then scan them into the computer and then save them on the hard drive, right? So essentially trying to make physical things digital. That was my whole entire job that summer.
Yeah.
But for me, as someone who, I guess, I make games now, but even back then, I would kind of, in my mind, gamify things. I would track how many things, how much I scan each hour, right, each day, and I'll try to beat my times and my output each day. And so I got so good at that I was done with my job within a month of a 2-month internship, right? And so for the final month, I got to walk around and meet people, and so I got to network and talk to folks. And I think within that, I met some folks who really had my back. And then the next summer, an internship came up where someone pushed me very, very hard to be essentially the guinea pig for JP Morgan by having JP Morgan have a high school intern be at the investment bank. And so I was JP Morgan's first ever high school intern in the investment bank when I was 17 years old. I finished my senior year in high school, and I was going to college. So I wasn't in college yet. It was a summer between high school and college.
Yeah.
And so it was wild, man. I was this kid. I was interning next to guys who were at Harvard, Harvard Business School, people who were like Wharton Business School, right? I was in the mix doing my thing. I'm tall, and so I think this being tall, I stood out. I was this tall, skinny kid with a big suit, oversized suit on. You know what I mean? But me, I work hard. I'm good with people. I look at where there's a gap, how I can fill in, and I fill those gaps, right? So for me, that's just how I function. And I think it kind of comes from sports once again, right? Like, how can I help this unit be better? And if it means it's me going and cleaning bathrooms, I'll go clean bathrooms, right? If it's me going and playing for the softball team and being a great softball player, that was something too, right? I played for the softball team that summer, and it was me and a bunch of like executives, and I was a stud. I kicked butt that game. And so from that point on, they knew who I was. And so so from early on, I was pegged as a future leader for JP Morgan. And so I kind of went through like the summer programs each year. And so by the time I was in college and I was about to graduate college, I had a guaranteed job already from JP Morgan. So it was great, man. I think it was me being very intentional, right time, right place. And then once I got my foot in the door, right, I just kept on doing amazing work, and then kind of went through like just the internal leadership programs, right?
Yeah.
And so after I graduated from college, I went to Brown, graduated from college. I was in between becoming a teacher or going to JP Morgan, right? And for me, I've always really cared about teaching and having an impact. But also I think at that age, I was still, how do I help my family? And
Still
that paycheck that paycheck from JP Morgan, I looked at, I'm like, I am making more than my mom, who's a nurse, has ever made her whole entire life. Just from day one, right? Like that's something which, like, just to think about that was something which I couldn't pass up at that point. And so I think I'm happy I made the choice to go there. And I have some great mentors who I still know from there, who I knew from when I was 17 years old, right? That first internship as a high school kid, who have had my back from that point on, who still mentor me now. So I think the people there, I appreciate. I think my problem was that some of the things which JP Morgan as a bank did, which I began to know more and more about, just didn't align with my values and my and what I was trying to do. And so I figured, let me just leave and apply my skills to do work which I control, and do work towards a mission which I could sleep at night about. And I think in many ways, a bank is all about making rich people richer, right? Which is cool. That's what they do, and I get it. That's how things flow. But for me, as Chijioge, right, I want to have my skills and talents applied to making people's lives better and trying to improve the world, right, in a tangible way beyond just having commerce be run through this one system. So yeah, that's my quick JP Morgan story. I got more stories, but it's a 1 hour podcast, an hour and a half podcast. So I'll stop there, man.
No, that's cool. That's cool. No, that's a great sort of story. I like sort of how, as you said, as a young person, you were very intentional, and you're like, okay, even if it was literally how much money, what's the best job to make the most money? Like, that's still being intentional and figuring out a plan and doing that. And you had to get your foot into the door. Once you got your foot into the door, it was great, but you had to work at it. Like, that your work ethic had to keep you going through those stages, and even going back to JP Morgan every summer when others were maybe going on holiday in their summer and stuff like that, but you were working for this huge ass bank. And yeah, I like sort of, I just like everything in terms of that, in terms of how hard you worked for that opportunity. And yeah, JP Morgan, a bit of a shady bank. But
all banks are shady, man.
Yeah, that's true. That's
the nature of capitalism, man. I mean, there's lots of funny money being taken in by these big banks, which runs a lot of the world's black market in many ways. So I tell folks that I don't judge, but you have to be aware, and at that point make your choice. But if you choose to work for a bank, that's completely fine. I have no qualms with that. Like I said, I have people who are mentors who I respect who still work with JP Morgan. But to each their own, right? And so my journey is my journey.
we can't be putting judgment on others. Because who are we to judge? You know what I mean? We've all done our stuff or done something which someone else might not agree with. So, but yeah, I think once you know the information, and if it doesn't align with your values, I think then you've got to make the decision. But I always think it's good to make sure that you are aware of what is happening and wherever you're working or whoever you're involved with. You might not know everything, but like, if you can get that information, and then figure out, okay, does this align with who I am? And then if it doesn't, I think then you've got to make a decision. And you did make that decision. And talking about moving on from JP Morgan, you worked in sort of sports technology. So what was that like, working in sports technology? What does that even involve?
Yeah, so even before I had signed on to be at JP Morgan full time, I had done different internships, right? Just to kind of get my feet wet. And I worked for a time at Bloomberg LP, which is a financial data company. They provide information to stock traders, to people who are essentially working on money. They provide all the data, the graphs, the news, right? And so for me, I worked there for a summer. And I met this guy who was on my team. And once again, I'm big on everyone who you meet, you treat with respect, and you just get to know who they are, right? I don't care who you are, what you look like, I'm going to treat you correctly. To be a custodian, to be a CEO, I'm going to treat you the same exact way, right? And so I think me and Sky got along quite well. He knew I love sports. And so he came to me and was like, yo, Chi, I have an idea to take the Bloomberg LP financial tools, like the tools which help all these companies look at data and make it look really pretty. Let's take those same tools and apply it to sports and help sports teams look at data and make decisions based on data very quickly. He's like, I have the idea in my head, but I don't know sports too well. Can you please help me kind of get the idea off the ground? And I was like, I'm like, hell yeah, man.
Yeah.
I'm like, say less, man.
Sounds
I'm completely down for it. So that summer, that was my junior. That was my sophomore year in college. Yeah, that summer, essentially worked like 9 to 5, doing my normal job, like internship wise, and from 5 p.m. to like midnight, I was doing the research for him. I was helping him kind of prepare a pitch to have this group within the company, which he would run, which would be called Bloomberg Sports, which will focus on working with sports teams. So we looked at working with baseball teams, working with football teams in Europe. Like we worked with, we began by working with, I think we worked initially with Cardiff City. Was the first city we worked with out there?
Close to me. Cardiff-ish. Wales is close, not too far.
Yeah. So I mean, so we began very small, but focused on baseball and soccer. But long story short is that group, which he began with me, began to do really, really well. So by the time it was 2012, 4 years after that began, I was like, no what? I'm about to leave JP Morgan. Let me call up my man Bo and see what's going on. So I'm like, hey Bo, like, I know I've been gone for a while, but I want to come back to the company, right? Let's figure out how I can give me a role. And so at that point, they were trying to get a lot of things in order from a financial standpoint. And so I think, once again, me being at JP Morgan, the financial like institution, I brought a lot of know-how around how to be organized in terms of systems, knowing how to really just be efficient. I brought that to them as a startup company, which is important. But also, I think for me, I brought just a culture of just trying to build a team of really great people. So once I came in, we grew the team from like 25 to about 50 people in 2 years, the people who I brought in and handpicked, right? So it was great to go from being at this huge company like JP Morgan, which has about 20,000 employees, right? Just like this huge company, to being a company of 1 of 25, trying to build culture, right? And trying to build from scratch and going out there and actually talking to a team's general manager or team owner about the deal, right? It was so cool, man. But the whole point is that we can use data to help these teams be more efficient. And so I think the idea still holds today. I mean, we're seeing way more professional teams rely on data and analytics. It began with baseball, but now basketball is fully an analytics sport. European football is coming very much that way too. So it's cool to say that I had a part in that movement, and I still take pride in that. And so the company which we began in 2008 was purchased in 2014 by the richest Black man in the United States. His company bought my company in 2014, and it was. I mean, it's special to have anyone view you being purchased, right? But it was also sad to see something which we had built now leave our control and now be in his control. That's a whole different saga of that era. But still, I think the fact that I was 25 years old, I was a CFO for a company. I got to build some crazy deals. I got to kind of be someone who was at the start of a movement in sports, which is still going on now with gambling, right? And how people look at gambling. Our company was very early on and trying to build things to that. I wish we had more control now to regulate how people gamble and things like that. But once again, once someone buys you, they take the tool in your IP, and now they can do what they want.
You can't just come in and be like, you can't do that. Well, actually, we own it now, so
exactly. So that's been tough to see. That's the tough part. You build something so cool and powerful, but then it can be used in different ways. Like all things, they can be good and bad from any kind of application or tool. And so, that's a quick, long and short. Once again, more stories there, but I will keep it brief for podcasts.
So, but you mentioned that you started the company in 2008, and for anybody knows, we had the Wall Street crash. So,
exactly.
Like starting a company at that point, people must have looked to you like, you're crazy. Like, what are you doing? Like, what was sort of going on at the time for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that was part of the genius of the idea, was that the company was begun within a huge company of Bloomberg. So Bloomberg LP, like, initially owned the group. And so all the staffing, all the resources came from this big conglomerate, right?
Mm.
We eventually spun off and became owned by them. But so early on, just having the Bloomberg name behind you went a long way in terms of getting clients. So it was something which I think, even though there was a recession from a global standpoint, there was still a client, right? Being these professional sports teams, which had a need, which we were going to provide, right? And provide a very fundamentally, way more efficient way. And we had a name of Bloomberg LP, which a lot of the ownership knew, right? All these rich people who for a long time have used Bloomberg terminals their whole entire lives, the ones who own these sports teams. And so, oh, Bloomberg Sports? Oh, cool. I know that. Let's have that meeting. And so I think in many ways we got to navigate very tough spaces because of the name we had and also the fact that our customer, being these sports teams, had a need for what we were giving them. And I think also we had results that the teams which initially began using our platform began to win games. And so I think it's a copycat league everywhere you go. People will copy what's working. And so that helped us kind of take off in '08. But to your point, the recession was why I was at Bloomberg LP that summer. Because in 2008, the recession, every single bank stopped hiring interns, even JP Morgan. So JP Morgan, it's an internship. No way that happened this summer. So I had to find a job elsewhere. And for me, I was using my summertime money to pay for college. I paid for school all by myself through internships and through working during the school year. And so that's in part why I was taking these high paying jobs. And so I think, what was really a crazy event, right? Imagine being in school and college studying your potential like place of work going down in shambles, right? And seeing people who you knew losing their jobs. So it was very emotionally a fraught time for me. But I think from that crazy time came this opportunity to kind of create and build. And I'm glad that for me, my viewpoints on how I can use my skills and now more around how do I build amazing teams and amazing products, right? That all came from that 2008 experience, just trying to build initially Bloomberg Sports.
Yeah, so finding sort of the I guess diamond in the rough in sort of a rough time. My analogy wasn't the best, but but seeing, I think a lot of people, like especially for me in COVID, like I was quite fortunate that I was able to have a coach, and he really helped me sort of develop what the Black and Raww podcast is and what Black and Raww is in general. And I think a lot of people sort of used COVID as a way of, I think we were forced to just sit and relax and reset and figure out sort of what's important to us. So I think a lot of people used COVID in a way that you used the recession and the Wall Street crash. So it's just about seeing the opportunity when everything else looks gloom and dark. It's about seeing the opportunity and then taking it.
Yeah, the great poet Jermaine Cole said, "There's beauty in the struggle," right? So I think that's exactly what you're saying. There's always some level of there can be good from a really bad time. I think. For me with COVID, COVID was when I first began seeing a therapist, who me just having to really process a lot of past trauma in my life, right? I think me seeing a therapist led me to finding clarity to say, okay, I can get married now, right? And I got married like 2 months ago. So I think there's beauty in the struggle. Thank you, man. There's beauty in the struggle. It's all about perspective, how you kind of view what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. So back onto sort of in terms of the sports technology. I know sort of loads of I don't know, but like I know of like teams that are using analytics. Like you said, NBA is all sort of analytics now. I think Liverpool used to be like love to use sort of analytics. I know a lot of Premier League teams are starting to use it.
Man City loves analytics, man.
Yeah. Say that again?
I said Man City is one of the biggest users of analytics. And I think in many ways their championship push, obviously they had more cash flowing, but just their ways of looking at stuff, especially Pep. Pep is big on analytics too.
Yeah, Pep is just a crazy genius, to be honest. You know,
Yep.
that man is something else. Like, yeah, will go down as one of the best managers to ever been in the game. Obviously, Saudi money helps, but you've still got to make a team out of that. You've still got to get the right players in and everything else like that. Because Man United, we see, in Chelsea, we see, you can spend lots of money, but doesn't always work out well. So what was it like being, what was the diversity like in sort of sports technology and in the field that you were seeing? Like, has it got better? Hopefully it's got better, but what was the diversity like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I really enjoyed being able to hire people to my company and build a team which was very much not like what was in the general field. Right? I think one, sports is a place where everyone wants to work in sports. Right? Everyone would love to work for their favorite team or for their favorite league. And so because of that, like employers have leverage to essentially like offer lower wages, knowing that there's a high demand for this role. So no matter what the wage is, the demand will be in point where someone will take on that job. Someone will have their mom and dad pay their rent for the next 6 months to have them do a sports internship, right? Someone will have this X, Y, and Z cover their expenses. So in many ways, you find lots of folks who come from more high-income families who work in sports and who have a legacy of having a family member be in sports, right? So their dad owns this team, so therefore they work on this team's marketing department, right? So there's lots of that going on in sports, man. So I think that's off the bat takes away half the jobs, if I'm being real with you, man. But then from looking at analytics, where I was working at people who look at data, data science, that field in general really leans more towards men and either white or Asian men. And so I think that also reflected in many ways the people who were on the analytics teams, right? Usually mostly men and mostly white and Asian men. And so I think that's the makeup. And I think if you look at lots of analytics teams for teams, professional teams, you'll find the same makeup, right? You probably find one woman across every 10 men. You'll probably find one person of color across every 20 people, right? And so I think it's a space that people don't give up their jobs easily. So people stay on their jobs for a long time, and so there's not much turnover. But once someone comes into that new role, they have to oftentimes take a much lower wage because of just the demand for the job, or they have to really come from being highly recommended. They have to know people who say, okay, I'm gonna give you this job because I know you and I trust you, right? So it's a very tight circle, close circle. It's not very diverse, man. And so I think for me, I keep saying I enjoy the fact that I can kind of build companies and build teams. All four of my companies have been minority owned, and so owned by black people and women. And for me, I also try to hire folks who are diverse, right? I mean, for me, I know that I don't want a team of all men. I don't want that. I don't want a team of all black people. I want a team of people who are going to be excellent, but a team of people who are going to be diverse in terms of how they view and look at things. So, yeah, I can't change the industry. I can only change my individual circle. So I choose to build my own circle, right, and build that the way I want to have the industry be. But in general, you're going to find mostly men and white and Asian men working in sports, especially sports analytics.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, to be honest with you, because everyone would love to work for their team, for their favorite team, or to be in sports, isn't it? Like, it's quite I'd say glamorous to a certain extent. I think just because of sort of all the money involved, and you've got, superstars and stuff like this. Like, I mean, I'd love to work in the NBA. That'd be really cool. Like, I'm sure everybody would love to do something like that. So yeah, I see why there maybe isn't sort of that diversity. But I like, in terms of, as you were saying, that you want the best people on your team, but you also don't want to sort of just make it all black people or all white people. I think better with more diversity, I think definitely comes more creative ideas. And if you've got people from different backgrounds, they're gonna be able to have a different outlook on things. Like if you just have everybody that's from the same background, same area, same culture, you're not going to be able to see something else that could make your company better, or that could, you could release a new product that actually, oh wait, this works for a lot of people, rather than this is just who we're thinking of because this is all we see and who we are.
Yeah, exactly. My current company, GameFlow, our executive team is all Black. So myself and my best friend, who's my CTO, and then our COO is a Black woman. We have a bunch of folks under us who are Black, Latino, Asian. Our distribution team is run by a white company, a white guy, right? Our rep, our agent is a white woman, and then our manufacturing head is based in Mexico City, right? And so I think once again, it's to your point. There's lots of value in having folks who also have diverse networks, right? I think people are also a collection of people who they know and who trust them and who they can kind of reach out to. So for me, I want people who have vast, diverse networks. Kind of from that point, make our collective network even that much larger, right? If it's just me and all my friends, we have but the same collective network, right? It's only but that large, right? And so I think that's something which I think is just as powerful. Who people know and who they can rely on, who also relies on them, is just as important, man.
100%. So you just mentioned your company. Is this the company that is creating the games that you were telling me about earlier? Could you tell me in terms of what you guys are doing and what your aim is with these games that you're creating?
Yeah, for sure. Yep, it is. So the company is called GameFlow, and we are a community and family-focused gaming company. So I make that clear, kind of help folks know that we are really a mission-based company. I think for us, just trying to do work in the community with folks like different after-school programs, working with boys and girls clubs, working with teams, working with parent associations, hospitals. That's really our focus, right? But for us, we know that most games out there are not very inclusive, and so they don't have inclusive characters. And so for us, we focus on making inclusive games. And I think that's really powerful to have someone see themselves in the game. So, oh my God, this kind of looks like me, kind of looks like my friend. Right? I think that's so powerful. So for us, that's how we're different. We right now focused on making sports themed games. So we made a basketball card game called Pickup Basketball. We're making a similar game called Pickup Soccer next, a soccer themed game. So I think for us, knowing that there's power in sports. I love sports. So is my co-founder. We figured why not build along something which we know and really enjoy, but build for impact, knowing that we can kind of use games to help young kids learn life skills which are tied to future jobs like jobs in analytics, right? Which require you to know how to look at data and say, okay, what's the key information based on all this data here? Like what's the key insight? Knowing how to make decisions very quickly, right? Decision making, that's very important in life. Critical thinking. So how do we make all those skills come out, but make that super engaging and fun? And so that's what GameFlow does, right? I think it's been cool to kind of build it. It's been a challenge just based on the economy, right? Us going through COVID and having to deal with that in terms of manufacturing and having stuff be held up. But it's all been a blessing. It's been a really enjoyable journey. I think we are really poised to take some really big leaps in the next coming months. So I'm excited.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds, especially I guess in the game market as well, very sort of saturated market. So trying to be different and provide something that is quite a different angle. I also love gaming. My brother's recently got he got a PS5 quite a while ago. Took him ages to get it. But yeah, I'm a gamer too, so I like the fact of being able to reach people through gaming, because there's some people are like, oh, how can you watch somebody play games? But it's like, it's not even like if you played the games, you'd realize how much of sort of, it's like a long movie. It's like a 30-hour movie, but instead you're sort of so engaged in it. Like, and you're playing as the character. So and the fact that the worlds that they can create and the graphics, you can literally feel like you're in there. So being able to capture that magic, but also teach young people sort of lessons and ways that they can engage the world and be better people or get the jobs that they want to get. I think it's sort of quite a unique way of sort of helping people, which I really like. And you're using your skills in gaming and in sports and in analytics to push that. I like that. I really like that.
Appreciate that, man. I'm glad you see how this company is a collection of my life passions and kind of my life skills, but also trying to, I think, pay it forward, right? And knowing that sports really inspired me as a young kid. For me, I used to hate. I still not hate, but I'm not a big fan of school, right?
Yeah.
I don't like school. I go because I have to, right? But as a kid, I used to hate school, man. But for me, like reading the newspaper and looking at stats for my favorite baseball team or favorite basketball team and seeing my and trying to understand who was doing what. Like I used to consume sports data. And that's what got me into math and having a way to kind of look at math in a better way, which helped me get a job on Wall Street, right? Which helped me do X, Y, and Z. For me, if I can help a young kid take their passion for sports and help them just engage a bit more and just say, okay, I will go to school just for X, Y, and Z, like me, right? And I'm so wrong, man. I did not like school at all, at all, man. So I think if I can pay it forward and help someone just kind of realize their potential and stay engaged, right? Like I was able to stay engaged through my love of sports, then that's my ultimate way of saying, like, universe, thank you for keeping me alive, right? Keeping me going forward, because who knows what could have been if I was not engaged in sports, man. Honestly, who knows? Like me being a kid who grew up in the Bronx at the age of 5 at that point in time, right? Who knows what could have happened if I was just a kid out there living life and find my skills in the right way.
Yeah, sports is, I mean, I think that's sort of been the running theme in terms of this conversation, that sports can literally be a lifesaver. It can literally give you life skills. Like there's so many things that it can do for you. And yeah, that's always why I've loved sports. Just for also all the other extra benefits that it gives you too. There's no real downside unless you get injured. But
yeah, that's the only downside. Which I have. That's part of my life story, man. When I was 13, I tore my left knee apart playing football. My mom and dad at that point was trying to support 7 kids, couldn't afford surgery, so I had to rehab naturally. I went to high school and played football, basketball, baseball in high school for all 4 years. And
on your knees,
destroyed my knee, man. So now today I've been told I have the knee of an 80-year-old man with arthritis, essentially. So I have no more knee cartilage, and so it's all bone-to-bone contact. That's a different story. But yeah, that's the one downside of sports. You get injured and affect your life, but I still find time to play basketball and all things in moderation. But I would not change things for a second in terms of how my life turned out.
To be honest with you, that's one thing which, like, to be fair, I don't think I'd ever want to move to the US. I can't lie. But one thing about the US that frustrates me is about the medical system. And we won't even get into it because we'll be here for much longer. But yeah, healthcare should be free. It should be part of your taxes personally. But
it's crazy, man. Quick story, right? For me as a kid, I did not go to the dentist until I was probably like 16 years old, because as part of my mom's health insurance for her job, it only covered dental care for, I think, 2 kids based on the average size of American families. So it was like mom and dad and 2 kids. My mom had 7 kids. And so she had to kind of initially prioritize the older kids to get dental care until he got kind of old enough to kind of now be on college insurance. And once I was 15, I finally aged into have intent
to
to a
the
certain
two.
extent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's just one of those things like, oh my God, that's America, man. That's America.
So before we end this conversation, I just wanted to sort of ask you one final question, which I sort of ask all of my guests, and that is, say if there's a young Black boy that's listening to this conversation, how can something that you know help them with an understanding of themselves?
Yeah, that's a powerful question. I mean, I think something which I know is that um, time is in God's hands. So I think knowing that we might have our goals and ambitions, and we might have an idea of when we think things will happen. But what I've seen over time is that things usually don't happen as you think they'll happen. And so as opposed to trying to be worried about, oh, when will I get this or when will this happen, right? Just relax and just do what you can do, right? And work what you can control and kind of let God take care of the rest, right? And know that when it's meant to happen, it'll happen. So don't stress things out too much, right? And realize that at the end of the day, things will work out at the right timing.
Ah, bro. So Chi, thank you very much for coming on to the Black and Raww Podcast. I've loved chatting with you. Hopefully we'll get to do this again some point as well. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tino. I appreciate you, man, and keep doing great things, man. I appreciate you having me on, and I'll definitely keep on checking out your podcast, man.
Definitely. Thank you. Have a good day as well.
What's up?
So, thank you very much for listening to this episode. I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode. I really enjoyed talking to Chi. I think what we talked about in terms of how sports can help you in terms of dealing with your social skills and being able to, adapt to the environment around you. But I also really like how Chi was vulnerable in terms of talking about his stutter, talking about how that impacted him and how dyslexia impacted him and what he had to do to deal with that. And even talking about how his wife had ADHD and how she meditates to deal with that. I think we sometimes have these things which people label us with, or that you generally do have, and there's a way of like, oh, how do I deal with this? And sometimes it's medication, but sometimes there can be other things that actually help you deal with that. So I just implore you that if you do have dyslexia, or if you do have a stutter, or if you do have ADHD, that there are things that you can do that don't necessarily mean you have to go to medication. Some people need medication, and medication is great, but I feel like sometimes we just immediately go towards that rather than exploring what's actually around us. So that is this conversation. Really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought about it in the comment section. And yeah, I don't think I have much else more to say to you, but other than that, thank you very much for listening.